the Brain Plate podcast. I am here with my co-host Leah. Hello, Leah.
Hi.
It's been about a month since we last did an episode, and today's episode is going to be an interesting one. I can already tell you that. Um, to have a good picture about what we're going to be talking about, it's an episode of an article that looks at personality and diet. More specifically, they look at how personality allegedly influences someone's dietary choices. Now, before recording this episode, Leah and I had talked a little bit about it, and we saw a couple of things that were not the best in this article. So, what we'll do is we'll discuss what the article did, the methods, the results, and then we'll kind of give our own opinions about the phrasing, the structure, and just other things about the article that were a little bit like, we don't know if this is the best way to go about it. So yeah, this is a systematic review published in Advances in Nutrition, and it analyzed 24 studies, and it tried to uncover how personality traits like neuroticism, openness for experience, and conscientiousness shape our food preferences and what this could mean for health. Could you tell us a little bit more about the methods, Leah?
Yes. So for this systematic review, they conducted a comprehensive search across major databases, so PubMed, Embase, PsycInfo, and others. And they searched in these databases terms that combine personality and personality traits with food choices, diets, and dietary habits. And when they made these searches with these five keywords, they had initially 2,321 articles. Some of them were duplicates, so they got rid of the duplicates. I forgot how many they said were duplicates. I think 65 of them. And
that's
then
a lot of duplicates.
Yeah, and then after, they're probably like translation, because it looks like this was in Italy, so it was probably in Italian, and they did translations and stuff like that.
Right.
I could be wrong, I'm not sure. But after 465 duplicates were removed, the remaining 1,856 articles were screened using titles and abstracts for selection, and what they were screening was any of their exclusion criteria. So they excluded any animal studies about eating disorders, studies about pediatric populations, ones about diet types that aren't necessarily associated with health outcomes, such as their example is spicy foods. And their last criteria or exclusion criteria was studies investigating food preferences for marketing reasons. And so that dwindled their articles that they looked at down to 64. And then they chose, of those 64, they included only 24 of those into their selection. Don't really exactly say how they went from 64 to 24, but they did. And so those 24 articles that they decided to use is what they're using for this systematic review.
All these articles had different cultural contexts, like countries like Japan, Finland, and USA, and they also all used different and various tools to assess personality and dietary habits. However, it did not specify which personality tools were used or which dietary habit tools were used. It mentioned only the qualitative assessment tool for quantitative studies, but that was only to look at the quality of the studies and not necessarily how they measured personality or dietary preferences. So that is still a question, like how is personality measured and how is dietary preferences measured? When we look at the results, the 24 studies that they ended up with were cross-sectional studies, and they were all conducted between 1986 and 2018. They investigated the role of personality in influencing the consumption of salt, the probability of having a restricted diet, the consumption of sugar, fruit, and vegetable intake, the consumption of animal fats, and preference for water with different mineral content. They had two different result sections: the personality and the food preferences, and the personality and the type of diet. What they found, I'll go over the first part and Leah will go over the second part. What they found is when associating personality traits to dietary preferences, they found that neuroticism as a trait was associated with unhealthy eating.
Can we
Higher consumption.
define, sorry, can we define or can you define when you go through this what these five personality traits are? Like, can you define
Yeah,
neuroticism, extroversion, so our listeners know what this
yeah.
is? Because those are kind of big words.
Of course. And that is something that I should have thought about, especially being, being told in class always like, you have to write to a audience that doesn't necessarily know what you're talking about. So no, I will definitely go over them. So neuroticism is a personality trait characterized by the tendency to experience more negative emotions like anxiety, fear, anger, and sadness more frequently and intensely than people lower on neuroticism. So it's not necessarily that one necessarily feels them, but they have the tendency to experience those negative emotions more. So they found that people who are more neurotic also are more likely to eat unhealthy. They have a higher consumption of sweets, soft drinks, and saturated fats. And it was also linked to lower fruit and vegetable intake. Then they found extroversion, and extroversion is a personality trait characterized by sociability, assertiveness, and a tendency to seek stimulation in the company of others. So they're just people, kind of. They like people, they like being out, being around people. Introverted is the opposite of that. So people who scored higher in extroversion, they were tied to healthier diets, including more fruits and vegetables and a preference for Mediterranean style eating. Then they had openness to experience. And openness to experience is the one of the big five that reflects a person's willingness to embrace new ideas, experiences, and perspectives. So that's kind of an easy term, I think. And they linked openness to experience to trying new foods, vegetarianism, and a higher intake of plant-based foods. Then we have conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a personality trait of being responsible, careful, or diligent. It implies a desire to do a task well and to take obligations to others serious. So when you're conscientious, you're just very aware of wanting to do things the right way or making sure things are in order, and to be conscientious of other people. They found that being conscientious, it predicts the disciplined eating habits and higher consumption of fruits and vegetables. Lastly, they had the personality trait please help me with this pronunciation.
Alexithymia?
Alexithymia?
Yeah, alexithymia,
Alexithymia?
something like that.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
My Alexa respond. Sorry. This personality trait is characterized by difficulties in identifying, describing, and experiencing emotions. It is actually a trait that is higher amongst the autism population. But this trait was associated with poor dietary choices, more alcohol, sweets, and fatty foods. So, pretty interesting findings, if you ask me.
So moving on to the next part of their results section was diet types and personality. And so basically what it seems to do is just kind of somehow, I may have missed it in the article, but I'm not really sure how they came up with these diet types, but they divided it into three. Um, and they started with vegetarians and vegans, and basically vegetarians won't eat meat, but they can eat like eggs and cheese and things that come from animals, just don't involve like the killing of animals. And then vegans, absolutely no meat, nothing, fully plant based diet. And they found that vegetarians and vegans are more open and empathetic. However, vegetarians also showed higher neuroticism.
Which, it's funny because when we looked at people who scored higher on neuroticism, they were linked to having a lower fruit and vegetable intake. Where when you're a vegetarian, you are typically higher on fruit and vegetable intake. So those two contradict each other.
Yes. And then they have this dietary type called magical beliefs.
Yeah. It was mentioned in a study that they used. It's magical beliefs about animal products.
Okay. So they found that more often in vegetarians, such as viewing animal products as as contaminated.
Yeah.
So that aligns more with the vegan vegetarian
Yeah.
side of it.
It's kind of like a subdivision, I guess, of the vegans and vegetarians.
That makes sense. Okay. And then self-control. People with low self-control are more likely to overeat and diversify their diets excessively. So what does this all mean?
It means a lot, because when you hear this,
what do they claim that this all means? Let's take our opinion out of it. What are they claiming? What are they stating as their results and associations, correlations? What conclusion are they driving?
First, personality traits clearly influence not just what we eat, but why we eat it. Traits like neuroticism and alexithymia are more common in people with psychiatric disorders, and these traits are linked to poor diets. Second, and this was something that we haven't mentioned before, but they found that public health campaigns could be more effective if they're tailored to personality, because they did find that some personality types are more likely to fall for certain campaigning choices, or so for example, people high in conscientiousness respond better to structured dietary advice, while those high in openness might be more receptive to trying new foods. Thirdly, understanding these links could help improve outcomes for people with conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, who often struggle with unhealthy eating habits. So what they did is they tried to link personality traits not only to dietary preferences, but also to mental health disorders, which I think is a big leap.
I also want to pull out the second point that they have, the second main point of their discussion, the public health campaigns could be more effective if they're tailored to personality. Part of their exclusionary criteria
was marketing.
Type of diets not clearly associated with studies investigating food preferences for marketing reasons.
Yeah. So it was one of their exclusion criteria, but then they decided to include it in their own article, in their own systematic review.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand, like, they wanna now take something that they specifically excluded, kind of from my standpoint, outside the scope of this article, and now they want to start incorporating into the discussion. Do I think there is a thing there? Do I think that there is some sort of association or connection that certain people are more drawn to certain types of advertisements and media campaigns and influencing and all of that stuff? Yeah, we all lean towards one thing more than the other, and we all are different in that. So yes, do I think that there's something there? I just don't think necessarily it should have been incorporated in this review.
I think so, that it shouldn't have been incorporated because, as you said, they specifically excluded it, and now they're trying to include it within their own article, whereas the rest of the article really focused on someone's personality and their dietary preferences and not marketing preferences about dietary foods.
Yes. So now that we've kind of gone through what this systematic review did and found and what they kind of see as the take from their research, let's dive into some kind of like research lens of this, because obviously research is great, research is amazing, research is what moves us forward, good, bad, indifferent. But it is very important to be able to read research with a critical lens, with a critical thought, and draw your own conclusions from what is being said, and not just say, oh, well, this article said so, it must be right. Or this
Yeah.
article said so, I'm not going to read anything else. I'm not going to form an opinion based on my own experiences, my own reading, my own research, my own learning, etc.
Yeah.
So let's dive into what are some contradictory or some things that we agree and or disagree with, or how our profession kind of drives how we think about this article, and what others can potentially take from hearing our own opinions and then doing their own exploratory work.
So one of the first things that I noticed, it's a systematic review, but it only has 7 pages, which I find very short because typically systematic reviews means that you have done extensive research. And I mean, they started with thousands of articles and they ended up with 24. But you see some systematic reviews who started with 10,000 articles and ended up with like 3,000. So going from 2000 to 24 is a big jump. And I thought the article itself was too short to really, in detail, go over all of the things. That is one of the first things I noticed.
Do you think the uh, the 24 studies that they pulled from for this article, do you think that that's just because speculating that there's just not a lot of research done in this area? Do you think that they were too narrow in what they were searching for? Or do you think they just weren't comprehensive enough to view the whole like picture?
Well,
Where do
I
you stand
think
on
it's a
that?
very specific topic, right? Personality and dietary preferences. How many people have really researched that? I don't know. So 24 on a topic like this, I'm not surprised. But if it is only 24, I expect a much more detailed explanation of what these studies found and how they found it. Because nowhere we really see any tools that have been used how to measure personality. Because if you want to compare studies, they need to have probably a similar type of tool. Because if you use a personality tool that is 200 questions long compared to a personality tool that is only 5 questions or 10 questions long, there's no way you can really reliable or be reliable on that, because it's so different from each other, you know? So I think it would have been nice to know the differences between those studies and how the different studies were conducted and how they come to their results.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there wasn't a lot really given as a comprehensive summary of how many of these studies used XYZ to classify personality, how many
Right.
studies used XYZ to determine diet or dietary choices. Like
Yeah.
there was no description other than some tables, which brings me to my second point. I didn't find their tables to be very easily followed.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of, to me, just had tables to have tables. I don't really know what kind of value that they thought it was going to add. Maybe I'm just interpreting it not in the right way. But to me, they leave a lot more to be desired and a lot of questions hanging in their results section.
Yeah. I mean, like the tables do show certain types of tools that were used to measure personality and measure taste taste preference. However, I miss that in the text, and I miss them linking the studies to each other in the text, because the table itself gives that information, but then there's no association between the systematic review and those other studies, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, because great, like you have the study, one of the study, and it was a questionnaire created by authors. Great, but what do those questions ask?
And
What
how
is it
valid is it? Like
exactly?
questionnaires are very specific in, or surveys, questionnaire type studies need to be validated. They need to be consistently used in research. Like if you're using a non-validated questionnaire, why? And again,
Yeah.
that might have been addressed in that person's studies article. But then it begs the question of like, bless you.
Thank
Um,
you. I'm gonna go again.
some studies using validated questionnaires while other studies are not? And
Yeah.
are we getting kind of a hodgepodge of results because of that? Or like what's really going on? I just don't feel like it gave a very clear picture in that result.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so that anything else that you kind of noticed?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Anything else that kind of you notice that you want to bring up?
Well, the contradictory that we mentioned, like saying at first people who scored higher on neuroticism showed less fruits and vegetable intake, but then vegetarians showed that they scored lower on neuroticism, I believe, or higher on neuroticism. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense to me, because if people who score higher on neuroticism have less fruits and vegetable intakes, but then also vegetarians have a higher fruit and vegetable intake, it doesn't add up, because that should be the same. Like, if someone scores high on neuroticism and they have less fruits and vegetables, they're less likely to be vegetarian,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, based on what they were saying, which brings me to my kind of questioning and skepticism about this article. It feels like to me that they're trying to almost draw a connection between apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Especially when they look at personality traits, because I look through the lens of nutrition outward.
Yeah.
And what you put in your body affects your outward characteristics, personality, right? And as you and I were discussing before we got on, first of all, food preferences can change based on what you eat. And as I gave you the example before we got on here, it's like I hated bananas. I hated the smell, the texture, the I don't know, the feel. Like I hated everything about bananas. But I was told, due to certain test or lab values, I need to start eating bananas. And I did. I ate a banana, forced myself to eat banana, and now I like bananas.
Yeah.
So first of all, like food preferences can change.
Yeah.
You got to keep that in kind of the back of your head of like, okay, how are they stating these things? And
But the question is also, could that be initially
like,
you didn't like bananas?
Yeah, but I used to eat fish and now I don't like fish because I
but
had a bad
that's
experience.
because just because there's a
And the other thing was, or the second of my three things was, there was no mention in their discussion or anything about what people were being told during this time period about food. So yes, they got rid of consuming foods due to like public or like advertisements or whatever their fifth criteria exclusion was that I read earlier. But you have a large year gap that they're looking to evaluate. Food policies, what media says about food, the coming about of media, social media, and influence, that changed like drastically in this time period, and they don't even caveat, we know this happened, or like this could have an influence, we did not examine this. Like there was none of that out there, because like example for salt, like we've gone through full circle, salt's good, oh no, salt's bad, oh no, you need salt, like, and all of that has basically happened in this time period that they've evaluated. Like to me, it's like that at least needed to be mentioned.
And what I also
and then I think that kind of leads me to my third kind of part of like, be mindful when you're reading this, because based on how you describe personality traits and the ones that they looked at, all of those can be caused or exacerbated by food and chronic food intake of what they're choosing. So eating a diet, the standard American diet, or diets high in unhealthy foods, can cause GI and hormonal balances, leading to those same characterizations of neuroticism. Same thing with the extroversion and conscientiousness. Maybe they just live a more healthy lifestyle. Like maybe. Same with openness, but openness, like maybe they're just more easily bought into different media campaigns or policy campaigns or influencers, which again, it's kind of like maybe that is leading to them choosing other foods, not really like personality, but their influence of certain things due to their personality is leading them to buy that. And then the same thing with alexithymia, or however we decide to say that. That can also, those characterizations can also be caused or emphasized by gut issues, leading to macronutrient imbalances, micronutrient imbalances, hormonal imbalances, GI imbalances, like all these things related to your nutrition that can exacerbate these characteristics of these different personality traits. So to me, it's like this article leaves more to be desired, more questions than they really answered. And I get the point of a systematic review is to kind of just summarize what's out there. And for me, this just shows way more needs to be done, because this does not really answer questions. Yeah, I think they took it from, scrolling down to their methods,
1986.
1986. to 2000.
1980s. There
Like, I
weren't
don't feel
even
like that gives
smartphones.
yeah, just the level amount of education in nutrition, the influences in nutrition, like so much has changed. Like to
So
me,
that's
that is such
why.
a crazy systematic review. Or break it down, and again, this might be due to not enough research has gone into this, but breaking it down by decade
Yeah.
to look and see how things changed or
Yeah.
something like that to give a bit more clear picture, because like I said, now we have all these questions, which I guess
And
is kind of like a good place to end, because it will give anyone who's listening to this something to think about. Mart has shared her opinions, I've shared mine. We've gone through what this research systematic review has said. In our opinion, as always, we'll link the document so you guys can read it yourself. We're all about helping you guys understand science in a way that you guys can, but also reading it yourself and bringing awareness that research isn't for PhDs or people in research jobs or careers. No, you can read research at any stage in your life so that you can draw your own opinions. Google Scholar is free. Just search it. Like that is a tool that you can use. Yeah, so if you do listen to this episode and or read this review, feel free to leave us your opinion of what you think about it. We want to start a conversation. Our whole kind of goal of this podcast is not only to educate, but and state our opinions based on research and help you guys understand research, but also start a community where we can discuss things. Yeah, so with that, we will see